Breaking news today, there are 5 main points to remember from Putin's lengthy annual news conference. The Russian leader made his first remarks regarding American journalist Evan Gershkovich, who is currently detained in Russia, and also implied that Western support for Ukraine was dwindling. At a pivotal juncture in his war with Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir V. Putin resumed an annual tradition and spent over 4 hours on Thursday fielding questions at his year-end news conference. After successfully repelling a counteroffensive by the Ukrainians, Russian forces have launched attacks on other parts of the front line. Meanwhile, a new aid package is stuck in Congress, suggesting that American support for Ukraine is dwindling. The Moscow news conference was very controlled, but it did provide some reporters with an unusual opportunity to ask pointed questions. Here are 5 things we learned from it. There was no hiding the self-assurance of the Russian leader. The demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, according to Mr. Putin, remain his objectives in the country. Nearly 2 years after launching the invasion, Mr. Putin is still using the same nebulous and unproven reasons, but this time he is in a stronger position. Putin has made it plain that he believes Western military support for Kiev is running low, and President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine returned from his trip to Washington this week without any additional aid to entice lawmakers to approve it. He stated that Ukraine has been receiving everything for free. However, these freebies may expire at some point, and it appears that they are already nearing their expiration date. There was no indication of a readiness to compromise from the Russian leader, even though he did say again that he was open to peace talks. When we accomplish our objectives, then peace will ensue, Mr. Putin stated. A deal to free 2 American detainees held in Russia is being considered by Putin. Mr. Putin has now addressed the case of Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who was arrested in March on espionage accusations, which he, his employer, and the United States government have all strongly denied. Experts agree that a prisoner exchange is Mr. Gershkovich's greatest bet for freedom. We want to make a deal, but it should be mutually acceptable to both sides, Mr. Putin said, addressing both Mr. Gershkovich and Paul Whelan, a former Marine and corporate executive currently serving a 16-year sentence on espionage charges that the U.S. has also stated as politically motivated. Regarding the potential release of the 2 men, Mr. Putin stated that the Russian government is involved in a difficult conversation with the U.S. authorities. The alarmingly high inflation rate in Russia is a major worry. As a result of rising military spending, which boosts production, and labor shortages, which force wages to rise, Russia's economy has recovered to its pre-war size and is projected to grow by approximately 3% this year, despite a flurry of international sanctions. However, record governmental spending has not been without consequence. Inflation has been on the rise since spring, and Mr. Putin admitted on Thursday that it may reach 8% this year. A member of the public voiced their concern about prices by asking the Russian leader about the rising cost of eggs, reflecting a broader sentiment about prices. Following an offensive joke, Mr. Putin apologized for his government's failure to address the issue. Putin views the conflict in Gaza as a chance for advancement. As the world mourns the loss of life in Israel's conflict with Hamas in Gaza, President Putin sought to deflect attention from the West and win over sympathizers by drawing a line between Russian and Israeli military actions. Putin urged his audience to look at what's happening in Gaza and feel the difference in comparison to this special military operation, his term for the war in Ukraine. Ukraine is not experiencing anything like that. Thousands of Ukrainian civilians have been killed as a result of Russia's invasion. As the West sought to isolate Russia internationally due to the invasion, Mr. Putin sought to rebut their claims. A lot of people think that we are doing everything right in many cities across the globe, he said, drawing from Europe, the United States, and other regions. Nonetheless, he was optimistic that ties with America could improve with time. We are ready to build relations with the United States, he stated regarding the U.S. The world needs the U.S., they say. Putin showed no signs of wanting to campaign with an election on the horizon. There was hardly any discussion of Russia's presidential election, which could mean that Mr. Putin thinks the result is already decided. Most people believe that Mr. Putin will easily win another 6-year term in March's election because he has such tight control over the political system. During the press conference, one journalist offered words of encouragement to Mr. Putin, saying to the Russian leader, "You're in power as long as I can remember myself."